Okay, here we go. So it is, like I mentioned, it is we'll refer to this as the RFX process because some of these components apply to not just information, proposal, or quotation. They could stop at one stage or keep going detailed as we go through the list. Um, so before I start, let's just speak about what is a sourcing event. It is a sourcing event. What we consider in the supply chain world is when we are supplier facing. This is the first time we're going to the supplier with an organized list of requirements or expectations. And at this stage, we as customers do invite the supplier and state, you know what, Mr. Supplier, I have a list of requirements. Can you please come and help me fulfill them? The type of RFX activities, it varies. Right now, we're going to speak about an RFX, but you could have RFX, you could be direct negotiating, you could have an auction, reverse auction, you could be doing a tender. They all mean very different things. They all have very different components. In any scenario, when we spoke about in the last webinar, we spoke about the planning phase. That will highlight what kind of RFX activity, if an RFX is the right one, to do for the sourcing that you plan to do. And this is critical because an incorrect selection at this stage certainly adds time to the overall process, which could be detrimental. If you're on a deadline, selecting the wrong process will either get you a bad contract because you're trying to rush it, or will delay your start because you want to do the right contract up front. Without further ado, for this, because there's so many different activities for this webinar, I chose to spend time on the request for proposal stage, specifically this stage because it has it is a little rigid, but it has flexibility as compared to a request for quotation or tender. It is flexible in the award scenario. When I say flexible in the award scenario, that doesn't mean that we are going to award to anybody we choose. It's just the key criteria may change as we go through the process, as opposed to a request for quotation. That still means that we would measure each individual proposal identically. It just means that the scorecard may change a little bit prior to opening the proposals. I do have to clarify that as well. Success, we are alternative proposals. In a request for proposal, what we're trying to say is, I don't exactly know how I need to get to my end state, but this is my end state. My end state is very clearly defined. These are a list of specifications, milestones, expectations that need to be met, and I need to go through, but I need to get there. I don't exactly know how I need to get there. This request for proposal allows us to define a method that we believe is adequate for our business, and allows the supplier to present alternative methodologies. The key here is oftentimes, as an organization, we know our business really well. We know what we do. We know how we do it. But that doesn't translate over to the supplier side. They understand their business. They understand their distribution, their own logistics network. So in some instances, asking them to do something in a very rigid manner, it will add cost and possibly risk. Everything has a price associated with it. With a request for proposal, we're trying to mitigate that a little bit without changing the end condition. So as I alluded to a little bit, what makes an RFP unique, there's flexibility on both the buyer and seller. This is key for when we're negotiating agreements for items we've never bought before, and certainly for new operations, when we have to test drive the logistics method as well as the end state method. This accounts for labor, equipment, material, services, all of those. It is a truly unique outcome, because as you go through the process and you start narrowing down the partners that you want to work with, you start getting into a very focused approach that leverages the specialty of the supplier the seller that you've invited, as well as your own needs as well. The award criteria can be customized. And this means that initially you thought, oh, you know what, I'll just go for a 1 year. But when you're going through the logistics plan, when you're going through the pre-work, post-work, you could very quickly realize that, oh, it may be beneficial for me to have a multi-year, to have performance-based, or any number of methods to be able to get to an ideal outcome, which is where an RFP is a little slightly different than an RFQ. The request for quotation says, thou shalt do it this way, and this is the expectation that I have. An RFP would be like, you can do it any way you want as long as you meet the expectation that I have. Of course, we keep in mind safety and regulations and all of that as well. And in this method, an RFP method, our procurement's customers, the operations team, have a very direct input in the actual document itself, as well as the certain requirements. You want supplier visits, you want site visits, you want to visit their plants, you wanted to run lab tests, plant tests. There's a whole bunch of requirements we can put in. Again, understanding that everything adds cost and everything may add risk, we have the ability to make it as complete as we possibly can for the needs that we have today. Right? I've said flexibility for the last few slides, but I do have to now go back and reiterate something here. Even though the process is flexible, there are some characteristics that that must be firm. The dates of your RFP, the letters of intent, the Q&As, the submission deadline, all of those need to be met. That allows our process to be auditable, meet governance and compliance standards, and ensure fairness across the board. The terms and conditions that need to be signed will be the base. The base is all the same, and everything is communicated to all parties, even though we may be getting to the end result a little differently. For structures of an agreement remain the same. Our desired outcome needs to be firm. What we can't have is, I don't know how to get there and I don't know what I want. We need to be able to have the answer of what I want as clearly defined as we possibly can make it, with some ambiguity in how to get there. Within reason. And then any required governance, environmental procurement considerations as well. As a procurement organization, oftentimes there's barriers that have been placed in what we can or cannot share. This allows us to answer some questions ahead of time with our internal customers as well as the suppliers. But when we're doing a request for proposal, usually how they define it is, there's walls that come up to maintain auditability, compliance, and to ensure fairness in the process. There are must-haves within an agreement, certain legal clauses, requirements for insurance. All of those are must-haves. And I keep repeating back, everything comes at a cost, and there need to be some aspects that need to be finalized. So whatever we would like, we want the safest agreement possible with the lowest risk. We're likely going to pay a higher cost per unit. If you take on more risk, that cost per unit slowly decreases as we start sharing the risk. In an RFP, that gives you an opportunity to evaluate both sides of the coin before you make a decision. Again, slightly different than an RFQ, where you're saying we want it done in a certain way. Therefore, the risk parameters have already been defined. And it's very different than a request for information, where in a request for information, we don't ask for pricing. We wouldn't send them information, commercial requirements. We would only send them technical requirements. And we would either proceed from an RFI to an RFP based on the outcome, in saying we invited 14 people. Only 4 of them seem to be qualified to supply us. Now let's move with the 4 into an RFP. That also adds time, but what you've done in the front end on the planning side, you've answered all the questions, the ambiguities, and they've gotten a chance to see your requirements, your terms and conditions, your operating, peculiarities, and then they would then be able to price the job accordingly. So some things there remain the same across the board between the 3 different types of activities. Now, like I mentioned, we're going to straight into the components. And these are, when I said high level, we talk about an RFP document and what would encompass an RFP document. And we'll speak to it a little bit on different areas. In the next supply chain webinar, I plan to spend a little bit more time, say, in the planning phase of an RFP or an RFI, so we can really get into details at that time. This one, we'll try to touch key points and then move to the next stage. The first page is the information page. That picture you see on the right is our Analyze and Improves template that we use to assist our clients. And it's created in a certain way as reds is areas we need to fill out. But what this document, this tab or states in no uncertain terms is you have been invited to quote on X for whatever supplier at this location in this method. So this gives you a very high level on why you're there. And what we expect you to do. It includes information such as contacts, milestones, dates and deadlines, policy or any policies that you would need to read ahead of time, any terms and conditions, that keys that would be there, all would be stated in the general information tab as upfront. So when you're reviewing the first page of the document, you would see what we're asking, where it needs to go, how you need to bid, and what are the key factors here. Now, this is an extremely important page. It cannot be you cannot understate the importance of a general information tab here. Moving on from general information to company information, I consider this an essential step. Typically, this is sort of a hit and miss. If you're doing a repetitive RFP with the same list of suppliers, it's likely you would exclude this page because once you have this filled the first time, it is unlikely that this will change going forward. The only thing that I would point out here is a company, everything in an RFP is negotiable. All pieces of information that you've placed and they fill out is something that you can use to your own benefit. An example I give here is if you have a lot of MRO parts or small parts that need to go, and there's multiple shipments happening between you and the supplier, the location of the customer service representative, the name of the customer service, your dedicated account executive would be a critical component of success to your business. You want to be able to have the supplier highlight this information so that they aren't, for example, offshoring it. If you offshore it, maybe they don't meet the requirements that you have, and this is sort of key in the sense that, hey, Mr. Supplier, we're working through our planning process. We don't have it all set up yet, but this is the list of parts that we need, and you're going to be my de facto person. I call and say, here's my demand plan or estimated usage. You manage that, and then we communicate back and forth. That could be a part of the agreement, as in a true partnership sense. Then at that point, the account executive and the customer service representative becomes a key component in the business and a key component of the agreement that you draft together. And so these are sort of the first two are sort of the text-based information, right? So you put all of the information here. Now you need to get to the meat and potatoes, the commercial conditions. I think this would be the meat. I'll go to the technical, which would be the potatoes in a bit, but commercial conditions, we need to be defining them really well. What that means is you want to give a dedicated space for your supplier base to input key pieces of information that matters to you. So you want to put the unit price. I have the list there, right? Unit price, price validity. They may give me $1 today, but that price may change tomorrow. That means I need to be able to know that, so that when the first time I'm placing a PO might be a different price than what they quoted me on the RFP. If there's update mechanisms, if this is inflation affects it, fuel affects it, all of this stuff needs to be detailed out. Minimum order quantity might have the best price, but you want me to buy 4 years worth of supply. So you can list out every single item or line that is key to you, to you making an informed decision. There is no exhaustive list. It is looking at the actual requirement that you have and then coming up with saying, these are the items that matter. And then you can speak to them during after the proposals have been sent. If they're blanks and you see blanks across the board with all the suppliers, that might be a cause to say, okay, maybe they didn't understand what I was asking for. Point of clarification. But this is a key phase. We should not assume that the suppliers would understand every facet that we want them to quote on. And if you let them, if you open it, if you keep it open, there's likelihood you'll get great variance, and it would be difficult to compare the proposals and truly understand what the true costs of this agreement are. And as we move forward, we go to the technical side, and this is a great place where you have your end customer, your client, your operations come in and say, you know what, I'm drafting this on my commercial side. I need you to help me draft something on the technical side. It is a lot more than just this is the spec that I have. It would be about if it's in a package, if it's in solution form, what kind of dosage, what kind of you want them to provide packaging. If you have packaging requirements, you'd put them in, or you'd ask them to send you information on how they package it. Is it cardboard? Is it on a pallet? Is it a plastic pallet? Is it heat treated? There's a whole bunch of information that could be put on a piece of document to clarify exactly what you need and what they provide as a standard. What they provide as a standard may not be acceptable to you, and therefore they may have to update their standard a bit, which will then affect the commercial condition. So again, going back to the same comment, we want to make this as exhaustive as we possibly can to the requirements that we have and that are known for the specific product. So therefore, when we want to do an RFP, it's a very deliberate event. It's a very deliberate intention of saying, this is important enough for me to spend, a few weeks preparing, maybe 7 to 8 weeks through the bid process, and then another 4 to 5 weeks for negotiating, getting the contract, and then implementing. It's a very deliberate. So at the beginning of the year, when you determine how many RFPs am I going to do, and you say I'm probably going to do 100 RFPs, that might not be the right decision. You need to be able to pick and choose the sourcing events that you need to do that are key to the success of your business. Evaluate the contracts that are actually working and see whether you really need to go to the market with them. Again, everything has a cost associated with it. So choosing to delay a sourcing or engage in a sourcing, there are some commercial and maybe not technical, but certainly commercial and contractual effects that do take place. Now, to come to the secret weapon of an RFP, it is the alternative proposal. The alternative proposal is an area where the suppliers are now free to engage in a method to communicate, Mr. Customer, you're doing it the wrong way. This is how we would do it. This is how we would fulfill your requirement, and it would either reduce the risk, reduce the cost, or stabilize the way you get supply or for services and material. This is a key component. Oftentimes, it is, again, depending on how quickly we want the return on the proposals, it is sometimes overlooked. But I can tell you with experience, all the key successes that come are in enabling the supplier to be able to utilize their expertise to fulfilling your needs. And you have to be able to give them space to do so. It adds a little bit to the front end in terms of evaluation and determining, but that's exactly what an alternative proposal is. An alternative proposal does not guarantee that we will accept it. It might just be that we're not ready for it today, but if we do the groundwork starting today, we may be ready for it next year. And next year we might be able to lower our costs and by X percentage if you're able to do this. So this is a great value lever that we have, and is often overlooked. But in a request proposal, we have the ability to do this. You can also put this in a request for quotation, but a lot of effort in the quotation is request for quotation is to meet the need as defined by you, with little flexibility. So this is typically where you would see an alternative proposal. Now, to wrap up, I know it seems 20 minutes went by really quickly to go through this, but I want to wrap up. A sourcing event can be multiple types of events. We could have the request for proposals, direct negotiations, auction tenders, and reverse auctions. So depending on which avenue you choose, your sheet or your bid sheet or your request to the supplier will look very different. In a request for proposal is an ideal state where you have best of both worlds, but sometimes that's not possible. In a direct if you get into a point where it's a direct negotiation, you probably won't use half the sheets that are there. It'd be very different expectations of the sourcing, and a very different expectation of the outcome as well. So in summary, when we talk about an RFX, multiple options are available depending on the need of the business. And I'd like to summarize this by saying this RFX module is a part of a strategic sourcing training course. And the screenshots that you saw were part of a toolkit we use for drive improvement with our customers. It's just one of the tools that we use. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Now, I will go to some questions. I did believe I got a few pings. I don't know if those questions or people participating. Let me see. Oh. Yes, Angelo.
Hey, Shafi, that was pretty good. Question: how would you deal when, and it's my understanding that there seems to be a growing trend, third parties writing the request for proposal. A lot of third parties are brought in to extract information and to formulate it. So now you have a three-party process. What kind of safeguards would you put in place for something like that?
You could put that up front in the actual general information tab, saying that we expect the customers to come in, the suppliers that are going to be coding this business would have the expertise to meet this business the requirement. The other thing that you could do before you even get to the RFP stage is when you do your supplier invitation and the letter for intent, you can have it as a requirement there. That would you be subcontracting? Do you have the specialization? How do you intend? So you can have a few statements there that automatically help you determine what the capabilities of the people that you're inviting are. So there are a few safeguards that you do. Now, it's not necessarily a bad thing if somebody brings somebody else in as a third party. So for example, I give you let's talk about a material supplier, for example. I may be the manufacturer, but I don't specialize in logistics. So I can get the material ready, but I may bring a 3PL that says they're going to house it, they're going to store it, they're going to turn it, they're going to ensure that it's packaged well, meets the requirements, and they're going to deliver it for me as a complete unit. I'm giving you what you want as at the end result, but we're going to have two different people doing it. Now they may operate under a single umbrella that says, me as a customer, I'm only going to contract with the manufacturer. Any liability that happens or anything that happens with the 3PL, the manufacturer is liable, or you can have a multi-party agreement if you feel that's best. But there are a few safeguards that you can have even before you get to the RFP stage.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Sorry, one other point of order. I have a poll up. If you could quickly go in and answer that before you depart, that'd be great. Well, okay. Thank you everybody for attending, and look forward to seeing you for the next one.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Shafi. Bye, Shafi.